Kevin had just arrived outside the Hayes family mansion with a reluctant Thornton, who had just found out that they were going to the wedding uninvited. As soon as they were about to enter, they were stopped by 2 guards. And when they were asked for their invitations, Kevin admitted that they didn't have any. Thornton immediately covered his face in shame with one hand. At that moment, he badly wanted to tell the guards that he didn't know Kevin. Why did he have to be so provocative about it? Thornton sighed. "Even if you're here to cause trouble, you should be more reserved, Mr. Williams. With so many guards here, we're sure to get our butts kicked right in front of everyone." As expected, after hearing Kevin's words, the smiles on the faces of the 2 guards gradually disappeared. "Sir, please don't joke around. Today is a joyous day for the Hayes family. If you don't have an invitation, please leave immediately," the first guard sternly warned him. "Are we really not allowed to enter?" Kevin teased with a mocking smile. "I'd like to see what all the fuss is about." "Please don't cause any trouble, sir. We're asking you to leave this place immediately." The other guard clearly had a violent temper. Kevin lightly nodded his head a few times, turned around and looked at Thornton. "Thornton, are you going to let them disrespect us like that?" Thornton took a deep breath. He knew that Kevin was about to drag him into some kind of trouble. However, it was impossible for him to back down now. After all, he was the future leader of the Huxley family. And now that he knew whose wedding they were about to crash, he figured it would be a great honor for him to congratulate the Hayes family on behalf of his own family. Given the circumstances, if he allowed himself to be chased away by 2 guards before he even saw the Hayes family, how could he still have the face to stand proudly by Kevin's side in the future? Not to mention marrying Brenda. "Who the hell do you 2 think you are? Hurry up and get out of my way!" Thornton erupted with an arrogant aura. He'd been following Kevin for a while now, and he'd been keeping his pain deep inside all along. If he didn't find a way to vent his anger properly, he would soon be stifled to death. With that being said, now seemed like a perfect time to channel all that rage and put it to good use. Thornton stunned both of the guards with his response. They were thinking, "Who is this young man?" Similarly, this situation attracted a lot of attention from the surrounding people. "Where did these 2 come from? How dare they cause trouble here today?" One of the guests was in disbelief. "I have a feeling that the Hayes family's wedding won't be smooth sailing," another one feared. Hearing the whispers of these people, the smile on Kevin's face grew even wider. In his opinion, since they were here to ruin the wedding, there wasn't anything to be afraid of. In fact, the bigger the commotion, the better. Finally, the 2 guards came back to their senses. "Do you have a death wish or something? Do you even know whose place this is? If you know what's good for you, then you better get the hell out of here. Otherwise, I'll break your legs to teach you a lesson." The guard roared with a vicious look on his face. "How dare you talk to me like that?" Thornton fiercely kicked the man in his chest, sending him to the ground. He wasn't used to anyone being so arrogant toward him back in St. Louis. Whenever he would walk out on the streets there, no one would dare to treat him with disrespect. But now that he was in Detroit, he'd actually met someone who dared to threaten him. He wasn't going to tolerate that. "Did that young man just dare to hit that guard? What's wrong with him?" Upon seeing this, all of the guests frowned and began to discuss with each other. Those who were able to attend the wedding were all people with a net worth of at least $10 million, and none of the wealthy guests from Detroit had ever seen them before. Moreover, with Kevin dressed so poorly beside Thornton, the 2 of them looked like an odd couple. At that moment, the other guards also heard the commotion going on, and in just a few minutes, about 50 to 60 of them had gathered around, staring at Kevin and Thornton with unfriendly eyes. "You really want to bully others with sheer numbers, don't you?" Thornton wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he took a few steps forward. With an arrogant expression, he pointed at the guards and said loudly, "I'm Thornton Huxley, the future leader of the Huxley family in St. Louis. If anyone isn't afraid of death, why don't you try me?" Whoever dares to touch me will be dealt with accordingly." Everyone watching them instantly became quiet when they heard this, while all of the guards looked at Thornton as if they were looking at a senseless fool. However, just as they were about to make a move, they suddenly heard the other guests bursting into an uproar. "My goodness, he's from the Huxley family of St. Louis? The Hayes family really has a lot of friends in high places. I can't believe they're close to such a powerful giant." Almost all of them had heard of the existence of the top 4 families in the Midwest, namely the Sutherland family, the Swinton family, the Thompson family, and last but not least, the Huxley family. Now that one of their future leaders had stamped his foot, the Hayes family's wedding guests began to tremble. For a moment, the Hayes family's guards were all at a loss for words. Based on the expressions of the guests, they could tell that this young man wasn't someone they could afford to offend. "If you wish to live another day, don't stop me from entering. Get lost and stand aside for me." When Thornton saw that the situation was almost over, he proudly turned his head and raised his eyebrows at Kevin, who simply smiled back at him. In truth, this was the reason why Kevin had brought him here. Even if all the guests had joined forces against them, they still couldn't hold a candle to the Huxley family. Suddenly, 2 middle-aged men hurriedly ran over. They were Clifford Hayes and Truman Anderson. "Thornton Huxley? I didn't know that you were coming. I'm sorry I wasn't able to welcome you when you arrived." Clifford greeted him with a flattering smile. Although he didn't understand why someone from the Huxley family had come uninvited, that didn't matter at all. Clifford knew that it would be a great honor to have Thornton attending his son's wedding today. However, when Truman saw Kevin standing there, he couldn't help but get goosebumps. He was the only one there who knew of Kevin's identity and that he had been alive all along. At the same time, he also had a lot of doubts in his heart. Why did Kevin take so long to get here? And how was he related to the Huxley family? "Finally, there's someone with discerning eyes. I was beginning to think that the Hayes family was blind." Thornton proudly raised his head and looked Clifford right in the eye. "What are you talking about, Thornton?" Clifford smiled apologetically and turned his head around. He scolded the guard sternly. "You bunch of idiots, get the hell out of my way." The guards were extremely upset to hear this. What was going on? They'd only gathered around to protect the Hayes family from these 2 unruly and uninvited guests. And yet, they were now being reprimanded before they could even make a move? "Come inside so we can have a talk. I'm sure this has all given you a terrible shock," Clifford said as he motioned to Thornton to enter. However, many of the guests in the crowd had noticed something unusual. While the Hayes family was now the most prominent family in Detroit, wasn't there still a huge gap between them and the Huxley family? Under normal circumstances, Thornton would never have any unnecessary communication with them, as he wouldn't have anything to gain from it. What was he doing here then? Still, none of them dared to ask this question out loud for fear of drawing Thornton's ire. Seeing Kevin slowly walking up to him, Clifford's eyes were full of doubt as he thought to himself, "Could it be that this ordinary-looking young man has an even higher status than Thornton? When did the Hayes family ever meet 2 powerful individuals at the same time? This must be my lucky day." "May I ask what your name is, young man?" Clifford asked with some apprehension. Kevin smiled with a mischievous grin. "You should have guessed that I would be coming here today. My name is—" "Kevin!" Everyone heard a loud cry of surprise. Before anyone could react, a white figure suddenly rushed over and jumped into Kevin's arms. "Kevin, I missed you so much. It's great to see that you're all right." Phoebe buried her head deep into his chest. No one could imagine how much she'd been thinking and worrying for the past half-month. Kevin could clearly feel that Phoebe had lost weight, and he couldn't help but comfort her. "It's all in the past now. Today I came to pick you up and bring you back to Chicago." In an instant, everyone's mind went blank. Wasn't the one wearing the wedding dress the bride? Why was she hugging this poorly dressed lowlife? However, they gradually understood from Kevin's announcement that he was there to snatch the bride away from the groom. Clifford got an extremely depressed look on his face. Beside him was Jared, who clenched his fist tightly as his body began to shake violently. Kevin's unexpected arrival was a slap in the face to the Hayes family, undoubtedly sending a message to them that even without the rejuvenation pill, his body could still recover. Furthermore, he was there to stop the wedding and save Phoebe. "Who the hell does he think he is? How dare he steal that woman away from Jared Hayes?" One of the guests was livid. "Does he know who he's messing with? He better let go of the bride right now if he wants to live," another warned. Many of the guests thought that it was purely a coincidence that Kevin had arrived at the same time as Thornton. After all, how could someone of Thornton's status have such poor friends? In addition, they understood that as long as they successfully helped the Hayes family in dealing with Kevin, there would surely be many good things in store for them in the future. So a lot of the guests got very angry and were ready to fight. "Kevin, listen to me. Phoebe is already my daughter-in-law, so there's nothing that you can do. If you behave, I'll allow you to attend the wedding. But if you deliberately choose to cause trouble here, I'm afraid you'll have to suffer the consequences of offending the Hayes family." Clifford's tone was as cold as ice. Even when the Hill family was still the most prominent family in Detroit, they had never insulted the Hayes family in such a way. So what gave such a useless person like Kevin the audacity to do so now? However, Kevin acted as if he didn't hear anything at all. He patted Phoebe's back, looked around, and slowly teased. "This mansion of yours looks pretty luxurious. It seems that Detroit has given your family a lot of good fortune and a fine home to live in." Without waiting for Clifford to react, Kevin continued and didn't hold anything back. "It's such a shame that this place will soon be destroyed. Today, blood will flow like rivers, and no one will be spared." His tone was filled with a vicious intent, and at the moment, Kevin wanted to eliminate the Hayes family in the same manner that he dealt with the Hill family in the past. However, instead of striking fear in everyone, Kevin's words had caused all of the guests who were there to stare at him even more angrily. "Are you looking down on me? You better be careful, you piece of trash," one of the guests threatened. "Why don't you take a good look at yourself first? How can you be so rude and ruin such a wondrous occasion?" another mocked. None of them had ever thought that a poor lowlife who could only enter the Hayes family mansion with Thornton's help would actually dare to spout such nonsense right in front of them. They knew that they had to do something about Kevin's audacity. When Kevin vowed to eliminate the Hayes family, many of the guests felt angered by his brazenness, thinking that he was just a random lowlife based on his appearance. Knowing that anyone who helped the Hayes family would benefit in the future, they were prepared to fight Kevin on their behalf. At the moment, most of the guests were looking at Kevin with cruel intent in their eyes. Among them, there were not only the business elites who could control the economy, but also some ruthless characters who had experience in getting rid of one's enemies. Faced with such an opportunity to show off their strength and combat skills, they naturally couldn't resist. Soon, various figures arrogantly walked out from the crowd, and they all rushed towards Kevin at the same time. Upon seeing this, Thornton stayed behind and decided that he wouldn't fight with such people. In his eyes, these people were all beneath him, and not much different from the country bumpkins he usually encountered back in St. Louis. When the men made a move towards Kevin, the other guests who were watching exclaimed and began to cheer for them. In just a few seconds, the previously festive atmosphere in the garden had turned into a celebration of violence. It was very clear to the guests that whoever played a part in killing Kevin would be able to obtain Clifford's approval and gain recognition from him. Furthermore, those who were present at the wedding believed that the Hayes family and the Huxley family had a secret partnership. In that case, proving themselves to Clifford would give them a chance to get on the good side of both families. "Who doesn't know the difference between life and death doesn't value his existence. Therefore, he deserves to die," a man shouted as he was about to attack Kevin. He then quickly extended his leg to deliver a powerful kick to his head, which made a sharp snapping sound in the air. At the same time, another man threw a fierce punch directed at Kevin's lower abdomen. The crowd was expecting to see Kevin spitting out a lot of blood in front of them at any moment. However, Kevin managed to quickly retreat a few steps back. With Phoebe still in his arms, the two men's strikes just barely brushed her hair as everyone gasped in suspense. That was extremely close. Truman Anderson let out a huge sigh of relief. His heart had been beating rapidly just seconds before. "Phoebe, just trust me. I'll take care of these men." After Kevin said this, he handed her over to Thornton for safety. "You want to use my life as a stepping stone for yours? We'll see about that. Do you think you have enough strength to defeat me?" As Kevin spoke, he grabbed both men by the back of their coats and raised them up like he was showing off two fish that he just caught. "How dare you? Let me go and fight me like a real man," one of the men said fiercely as he tried to break himself free. "Why the hell are you talking so much? If you want to fight, then stop complaining and start hitting," Kevin teased. "Don't worry, you lowlife. I'll make sure that your life won't be wasted. Your death will be a fortune to me," the man sneered. Kevin threw the two men towards the crowd, then turned to his other challengers and taunted them. "So, are you guys going to fight me or not? Do you think I'm scared because there are so many of you?" Insulted by Kevin's words, the group of ruthless characters cracked their knuckles and stretched their backs as they looked at him with contempt. Little did they know that when Kevin was looking at them, he could only see a bunch of helpless pigs that were waiting to be slaughtered. "I already told everyone that today, blood will flow like a river and no one will be spared. If that didn't serve as enough of a warning for any of you, then you can't blame me for what's about to happen next." Vicious intent burst out from Kevin's eyes. This time, he didn't retreat. Instead, he rushed towards the ruthless characters like a hungry wolf that was ready to eat. And the ones who bore the brunt of his attack were the two men who had attacked him first. With lightning speed, Kevin went after the man who had almost kicked Phoebe earlier and instantly shattered his leg by sending a kick of his own. After that, he grabbed the second man by his wrists and twisted them both to send a message. These two cracking sounds and the cries of both men echoed throughout the entire garden, causing some of the other guests to feel a chill down their spines. However, this was only just the beginning. Kevin, who was now surrounded by several ruthless characters in a circle, smiled as he boldly challenged them all to come at him. No matter how many men tried to attack Kevin at once, it didn't seem to matter at all. Using a combination of strikes to unpredictably hit his opponents from every possible angle, the end result was always the same as he sent all the men flying into the air and falling to the ground in just a matter of seconds. As the last person fell to the ground, the entire scene was silent. With broken bones and bloodied bodies of unconscious men all over, what started out as a lopsided beating had turned into Kevin's display of sheer dominance, as he proudly stood tall over everyone. Being the last man standing, none of the other guests dared to say another word of disdain towards him. The Hayes family members were left dumbfounded by this outcome. Compared to Kevin, weren't those some of the most notorious gang leaders in all of Detroit who were lying on the ground? How did Kevin defeat them all like it was a piece of cake? Are all of the guests invited by the Hayes family just a bunch of trash? None of them can fight. Kevin stretched his arms and looked very relaxed. Everyone's faces turned extremely pale when they heard this. Kevin had just gravely injured half of the upper echelons of Detroit, but they didn't dare contradict him. None of them wanted to risk death. By then, even Clifford and Jared Hayes' anger and spitefulness had been gradually replaced by fear and distress. They'd seen ruthless people before, but they'd never encountered someone like Kevin. "Kevin, you're an absolute madman," Jared cried hysterically. "So what if I am? Didn't you come to my office in Chicago just to see me a few days ago?" Kevin sneered as he gently dusted off his clothes. "Wait, You're the president of the Williams Company? Jared's face was once again filled with shock and anger. Mr. Williams, aren't you going too far by doing this? Clifford didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. How am I going too far? Compared to the Hayes family bullying others with their power, as well as using a fake pill to deceive the Anderson family into a marriage agreement, what I'm doing can only be considered as payback, Kevin replied with a faint smile. Bullshit! Are you saying that the rejuvenation pill is fake? A few traces of panic suddenly appeared on Jared's face. Only then did Truman come back to his senses as he stared at Clifford with his eyes wide open. How dare you lie to me like that? Truman had been keeping a low profile for many years, but he no longer cared about his own safety. After all, his only daughter's marriage would affect the rest of her life. Truman, don't get too agitated. Kevin is making some serious accusations that are founded on baseless lies. You mustn't believe anything that he says. Clifford hurriedly reassured him. Forget it. There's no point in arguing. But before I forget, I know there was supposed to be a wedding today, so I actually have a big surprise prepared especially for the Hayes family. With that, Kevin clapped a few times, and suddenly the sound of countless loud footsteps could be heard reverberating throughout the entire mansion. When everyone in the garden looked up, over 100 figures had surrounded them from above. They were all sporting armbands with an emblem of what looked like a radiant sun. When he saw them, Clifford anxiously thought to himself, why didn't the leaders of the 10 grade schools come? Didn't they receive our invites? Unbeknownst to him, Kevin had actually sent his men to block off all the roads leading to the Hayes family mansion just prior to his arrival. They even set up multiple detours and under-construction signs that would only lead other guests further and further away until they eventually gave up, thereby preventing any of the 10 grade school's leaders from coming. Just then, 5 powerful figures descended from the walls of the compound. They lowered their heads respectfully to Kevin as they greeted him. Chancellor. Dylan Hill then took one step forward and loudly proclaimed, here in Detroit, the Hayes family has been found guilty of colluding with the Hill family for the past few years. On behalf of the people of Detroit, the Radiant shall righteously enforce justice today by eliminating the Hayes family once and for all. Dylan, you're not dead? Clifford trembled. He seemed to be at a loss for what to do because he was too scared. Dylan didn't answer his stupid question. Not only did the Hayes family commit all kinds of evil deeds, they even secretly acted as spies for the different powers. Today, no one in your entire family shall be spared from facing the blades of justice of the Radiants. Everyone attack, Kevin casually said those 2 words. He then quickly walked over to Phoebe and made her smell some herbal sleeping powder that he had concocted, which instantly made her fall asleep. At the same time, he snapped his fingers for Spencer to do the same to Truman. It was better not to let the 2 of them see such a bloody scene. For the next hour or so, the entire Hayes family mansion fell into complete chaos. Wails and cries of pain were mixed with the sounds of begging for mercy, but this didn't stop the Radiants from carrying out their mission. In his final moments, Clifford was feeling deeply regretful and trembling in fear for himself and his family. How was he about to lose everything in the blink of an eye? Since the ultimate showdown had yet to begin, all of the intel that he'd previously gathered over the years was rendered useless. And without any of the 10 grade school's leaders there to protect them, no one from the Hayes family was spared from death at the hands of the Radiants. After over 100 members of the Radiants had surrounded the Hayes family mansion, Dylan Hill announced that the Radiants would enforce justice by eliminating the Hayes family once and for all. As Kevin gave the order for his men to attack, Phoebe and Truman were put to sleep so that they wouldn't witness what was about to happen. And without any of the 10 grade school's leaders there to protect the Hayes family, none of their members were spared from facing an untimely death. Kevin patted Thornton on the shoulder and told him to put Truman Anderson into the car. He then carried Phoebe and slowly left the Hayes family mansion with them. "Spencer, go and tell the people of the 10 major schools that the Hayes family has been eliminated by the Radiants. If they have any questions, there will be a meeting at the Ocean Hotel in Detroit at 8 o'clock tonight. Also, help me gather all the influential people in the city, especially the families who attended Jared Hayes' wedding today. I'd like to have a separate talk with them at the same hotel this afternoon," Kevin ordered nonchalantly before leaving. "Yes, Chancellor." Spencer nodded his head respectfully. As for the bloody scene that was unfolding behind him, Kevin didn't even turn his head around to look at it. In the past, he hated those types of cold and vicious people the most. He thought that they had no regard for humanity and didn't treat the lives of others with respect. But now, the cruel reality has forced him to take these drastic measures. Consequently, this was why he preferred to delegate all the senseless violence to his men. In the grand scheme of things, he believed that the end would justify the means, and as long as he only allowed the purging of evil people and always protected the interests of the greater good, then he could preserve the righteous justice that the Radiance was founded upon. After returning to the Radiance's headquarters, Kevin couldn't help but smile sadly as he looked at Phoebe, who was still sleeping on the bed. Kevin had been sitting by the bed for a long time, lost in thought. At the moment, he still didn't know how to judge the relationship between the two of them. While Phoebe's feelings for him were very clear, his wife Lily was still waiting for him to return to his apartment. Just then, Phoebe slowly opened her eyes, and when she saw him, she immediately smiled happily. "Kevin, do you know how much I've missed you? I was afraid that I would never see you again." Phoebe reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist. She pressed her head tightly against his chest, as if she was afraid that he would suddenly disappear into thin air. "Don't be afraid, Phoebe. It's all over now. The Hayes family will never cause you any trouble ever again." Kevin gently patted her back and comforted her. Upon saying these words, the room fell into a deep silence as neither of them talked, and the only thing that they could hear was the sound of each other's breathing. The atmosphere became more and more tender. "Kevin, Phoebe had a lot of things she wanted to say, but she didn't know how to tell him at that moment. "You don't need to say it. I understand," Kevin said gently. "You must still be tired, so you should keep resting for now. As for that matter, we can talk about it at a later time." Phoebe nodded lightly, but the happiness on her face couldn't be concealed. 2 hours later, what happened to the Hayes family had swept across all of Detroit at warp speed. The news reported that their mansion had suddenly caught fire, and while all the guests had survived with grave injuries, none of the Hayes family members made it out alive. Of course, not many people were willing to believe such a deceiving report. Everyone knew that eliminating the Hayes family in broad daylight wasn't something an ordinary person or organization would pull off. Someone powerful had been bold enough to send a message, and when rumors spread that the Radiance was behind this, they all wanted to find out what exactly had happened. The afternoon sun shone through the window into the room. By then, many of the most influential and powerful people of Detroit had already gathered together in a private room at the Ocean Hotel. Most of them were families of the guests who were currently being treated in the hospital. While they were supposed to be watching over their loved ones, the Radiance had suddenly gathered them all together for a meeting. "Do you know anything about the Radiance's leader? How can he call us here and then leave us hanging? We've been waiting here for an hour and there's still no trace of him," a man complained. "Who cares about his background? Detroit's our territory. Even if the Radiance is a powerful organization, their leader has to deal with me first. I won't forgive him for what happened to my son," another sneered. "But I heard that the Chancellor of the Radiance is quite mysterious and unpredictable. On top of that, their organization seems to have mastered many kinds of advanced pill recipes. Even the top 10 schools in the Herbalist Society can't do anything to them," a woman commented. "At the end of the day, we're just ordinary business owners. Although our energy base has been slightly boosted, we're still too weak to face any of them," another one of them conceded. Upon hearing this last point, the huge room instantly fell into silence. Those who were very angry and resentful just moments before and who wanted to take the lead in confronting the Radiance's chancellor couldn't help but restrain themselves after thinking about it carefully. Suddenly, the door of the room was slowly pushed open. Dozens of men wearing black with armbands walked in one after another, followed by Dylan, Sarah, Julia, Cameron, and Isaiah Hill. When they saw the 5 of them, some of the wealthy people in attendance immediately cried out in surprise. "Aren't those the 5 people from the Hill family? Could they be the ones who created the Radiance?" One of the guests wondered. "I hope not. Think about it. The Hill family has already been destroyed. Even if the 5 of them managed to survive, they're no longer the powerful giants that they once were." Another person scoffed. "If that's the case, then who are the 5 of them working for now?" A third one wondered out loud. Dylan looked around the scene. He frowned slightly as if he was dissatisfied with all the chatter. "Silence!" Because of his strong energy base, his voice sounded like rolling thunder in the sky, instantly shutting down everyone's discussions. After feeling this powerful aura coming from his body, the people couldn't help but change their expressions. These days, weaker people could only admit defeat if they didn't want to face death. At that moment, a figure slowly walked into the room, immediately attracting everyone's gaze. Unlike the others, he was dressed in white and wore a pearl-white mask. The 5 Hill siblings and the other dozens of men immediately went down on one knee to acknowledge his presence before respectfully calling out, "Greetings, Chancellor." Everyone could tell who he was. He was none other than Chancellor Kenneth Wilkinson of the Radiance, the man who currently was getting the most attention of anybody in the entire Midwest. No one there had thought that a mysterious and elusive man like the Chancellor himself would make an appearance in person. And because of the white mask he was wearing, no one could see his face clearly. However, they soon recovered from their awe, and as they remembered what had happened at the Hayes family mansion, they couldn't help but look at him with disdain in their eyes. Under the disguise of his mask, Kevin took a moment to scan the room. "I know all of you are influential people in Detroit. Regarding what happened to some of your family members, I would like to express my deepest sympathies. But I'm sure your loved ones will all survive, so please don't be too upset," Kevin said slowly. While the guest at the Hayes family wedding knew his true identity, he figured it would take a long while before any of them would wake up. And if they did, he was confident that they would be too traumatized and afraid to ever speak about what truly had happened that day. Upon hearing his words, everyone frowned. They thought to themselves, "Why did you have to injure them so badly then? How dare you pretend to sympathize with us?" However, none of them had the courage to say this out loud. In fact, they even forced themselves to put a smile on their faces. "Chancellor, you don't need to be too sad. It's not your fault. After all, no one wanted this to happen," one of the influential people declared. "Chancellor, please pull yourself together. After all, you have to look after your health," another one of them added. Deep down, everyone felt bitter in their hearts. What the hell was going on? They were clearly the victims here, but now they were trying to comfort Kenneth Wilkinson instead? "Since everyone insists, I'll try my best not to worry about it so much anymore." A smile suddenly appeared on Kevin's face. Seeing this made Spencer and the 5 Hill siblings a little concerned. Even they couldn't believe how Kevin had changed his facial expression so quickly. Everyone knows that the Hill family has committed many evil acts in Detroit and has already been eliminated by the Radiance. As a result, the 5 remaining family members have now pledged their allegiance to our organization, and they will help the Radiance uphold justice in the future. There's no need for anyone to have any doubts about this. Kevin gestured to the 5 Hill siblings. With that being said, while the Hayes family appears to be amiable on the surface, they've in fact done many wicked things for the sake of wealth. I believe that everyone here has been bullied by them in the past. Isn't that so? Seeing that no one objected to his words, Kevin continued. Now that both the Hill and Hayes families have been eliminated to benefit the greater good of the people, I hope that everyone in Detroit will take care of the Radiants in the future." This long speech caused all of the influential people to frown deeply, even though what Kevin had told them was right. This was because behind his righteous words was a very clear statement. The Radiance wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, and the remaining families would have to coexist with them. What's more, they were going to take the biggest share of the profits. With the Radiance firmly establishing itself at the top of the food chain, how could they feel at ease? Suddenly, a man stood up and laughed for more than 10 seconds. The Chancellor just admitted that he was behind what happened to both the Hayes and Hill families. Can't you see? He was just laying the foundation for the Radiants to march into our city. Finally, he stared at Kevin straight in the eyes. Today I'll make my stand clear. Chancellor, although we're very happy that you got rid of those two tyrants, Detroit doesn't need the Radiants to come and save us. Therefore, I advise you to return to wherever you came from.
He's right, Chancellor. While we appreciate the offer, I'm sure we can handle the matters in Detroit ourselves. Perhaps you should lead your members to save another city elsewhere.
Another man stood up and agreed with the other.
We don't mind if you leave behind any contact details. If we do need you to help us with anything, we'll let you know. We'll also send over a generous gift as a sign of our gratitude for eliminating those two evil families.
With the two of them echoing everyone's inner sentiments, the rest of the people couldn't help but feel reassured. Slowly, more and more people began to speak against the Radiants, not so subtly expressing that they weren't welcome. However, the faces of the 5 Hill siblings became increasingly annoyed when they heard this. Their fists were now tightly clenched together, and their auras were becoming more intense. How could they dare to disrespect Kevin like this? Weren't they afraid of what he could do to them? While all of this was happening, Kevin, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly moved as he rushed in front of the two men who had just stood up to defy him. Like a swift blade, he then drew his spiritual energy and sent a powerful slap to both of their faces, instantly snapping their necks and killing both of them. What a shame. Kevin dusted off his hands as he disapprovingly shook his head. He had hoped that he wouldn't have to kill anyone, but he felt that he needed to set an example so that everyone would take him seriously. Clearly, this worked, as the mood of the other influential people in the room instantly changed. They didn't expect that the Chancellor would dare to violently end the two men's lives just because of a disagreement. Dylan tactfully turned around and ordered some of the other Radiance members. Investigate the background of those two people immediately. If you find that they've done anything illegal, spare no one in the family and immediately transfer all of their assets to the Radiance. We can use those funds to help people in need. When they heard this, everyone's faces turned pale, and some of them gulped in amazement. They all thought to themselves, how many of us could sit here in such high positions today while having a clean and spotless record? This made them shudder at the thought of boldly speaking up like the two men had earlier. Dylan's words illustrated how the Radiance operated. Those who were willing to cooperate with them would benefit from their protection, while those who dared to go against them would suffer their unforgiving wrath. This also showed that the Radiants didn't really care about the welfare of these wealthy individuals, because even if they didn't willingly give them what they wanted, they would just forcefully take it from them anyway. Was this truly righteous justice being served? To everyone in the room right now, the Radiants just seemed like a bunch of ruthless characters themselves. What could happen next? When the influential people realized that the Radiance was planning to establish itself as the top organization in Detroit, two men stood up against Kevin. When the rest of the guests began to speak up as well, Kevin suddenly killed the two men to set an example. The others' faces had turned pale in shock, because they knew that they had to cooperate with whatever the Radiants wanted, or risk losing their entire family's lives. As a result, they began to question whether the Radiants truly served righteous justice as they claimed, or if they were just ruthless characters like everybody else. Now that those two annoying flies are gone, can we continue our discussion? Kevin sat back down on the chair and put his feet on the table. No one dared to say he was being rude. As they looked at the two men lying dead on the ground, they were silently relieved to still be safe and alive. Why isn't anyone saying anything? Could it be that you still don't welcome the Radiance? Kevin's brows furrowed and his tone became cold.
Chancellor, the Radiance definitely has my support,
one of the guests reassured him.
Chancellor, from now on, all of Detroit will respect you.
Chancellor, I have a very lucrative project in the works. I wonder if you're interested in discussing this later over dinner. My treat, of course, a third one proposed. One after the other, several influential people suddenly rushed to express their loyalty to Kevin. They were afraid of being killed then and there if they didn't play their cards right. Kevin raised his hand slightly. Thank you for the warm welcome, everyone. The Radiance will never forget what you've done today. In the future, we plan to build hotels and department stores as well as set up companies in various leading industries such as biotechnology, among others. With that being said, is anyone interested in forming a business partnership with us?
Of course, Chancellor. Just tell us how much it costs,
one of the guests exclaimed. Rest assured, Chancellor, we shall serve you no matter what it takes. Another expressed her loyalty enthusiastically. Just like that, a series of proposals and contracts were sent over like free-flowing water, and it wasn't until 6 o'clock in the evening that they were all signed. According to their agreement, half of the profits generated by everyone's businesses in Detroit would fall into the Radiance's hands, giving them a solid financial backbone for the next 30 years. At the same time, inside another luxurious private room of the Ocean Hotel, the leaders of the 9 major schools were all frowning. They were supposed to attend the wedding of the Hayes family earlier that day, but they'd been led astray by various detours and road signs that prevented them from going. Soon after, they received the news that the Hayes family had been eliminated. Jeffrey Bowie violently slapped the table in frustration.
The Radiance is too arrogant. How dare they pull such a trick right under our noses?
The Radiance isn't just aiming for the Hayes family. I heard that they've also gathered all the influential people in Detroit together. I wonder what they're discussing.
Wayne Ford stroked his chin as he contemplated the situation.
Who cares what they're discussing? If they don't give us an explanation tonight, we must immediately join forces and destroy the Radiance.
Jeffrey Bowie couldn't hold his temper any longer.
The Radiance has over 10,000 people now, and their founder is mysterious and elusive. If their members can really fight, they'll definitely hurt their enemies a lot without minding if they suffer some casualties of their own,
Paul Vaughn said while he was also deep in thought.
So according to what you're saying, we should just swallow our anger? How are we going to survive in the future?
Jeffrey unrelentingly refused. After a few seconds of silence, Paul had an idea.
Doesn't the Radiance have a lot of pills?
Everyone in the room suddenly came to the same realization after hearing this as Jeffrey and the others looked at each other with a wicked smile. The Radiance's main advantage over them was the pills that they offered. Thus, if they could find a way to get those pill formulas in their hands, it would be difficult for a new organization like the Radiance to sustain their current popularity. Meanwhile, in the Steele family mansion back in Chicago, all of the family members were currently gathered together. Norman Steele had just undergone an operation and was still in a coma. Since then, he'd been confined to a hospital bed to rest and recuperate. However, the Steele family's business couldn't risk being affected, so Dalton had gathered all the family members together to stay united during this tough time. With Dalton's support, Miranda had been discussing business matters with them when the door of the mansion suddenly shattered. At the same time, 2 of their guards were sent flying in, and as they fell heavily on the floor, they spat out a mouthful of blood before collapsing unconscious. Dalton immediately stood up and angrily shouted,
"Who dares to come and cause trouble in our home?"
Right after that, the people of the Steele family started preparing themselves for a fight. They looked at the door as if they were about to face a great enemy. It had been many years since the last time someone had attacked them, so everyone saw this as a challenge to the Steele family's authority. But who in Chicago would have the courage to do something like this? After a brief moment of suspense, Director Renee Silver slowly walked in with a cold look on her face. She first scanned the hall and then locked her eyes on Dalton.
"What are you doing here?"
Dalton asked in a stern voice. "Nothing. I was actually just about to lure you out." Renee stated her intentions clearly.
"How dare you come here and disrespect the Steele family like this? I know you've constantly been looking for trouble with my brother. You should be thankful that I haven't sent my men to seek revenge on the Union."
Dalton's facial expression had become extremely serious. "Enough chit-chat. Spending too much time and effort here is just a waste of my energy. Now that you know why I'm here, are you going to follow me obediently? Or do you want me to drag you out?" Renee sneered.
"Where did this crazy woman come from?"
Two members of the Steele family shouted as they rushed towards her. However, in the next second, with just a casual wave of Renee's palm, an incomparably strong spiritual energy burst out towards them in an instant, causing the entire mansion to shake. The two Steele family members tried to move away quickly, but the speed with which Renee struck was even faster, sending them flying into the air before crashing heavily into the wall. Due to the harsh impact, they were left unable to stand as they curled up in pain. This ignited the anger of the other Steele family members as all of them now picked up their weapons and rushed towards Renee to attack. Unfortunately, although these ruthless people weren't afraid of death, they were still no match for Renee's power. In less than 30 seconds, all of them were lying on the ground in front of Dalton and Miranda, letting out a series of piercing cries. "I'll ask you one last time. Do you want to leave with me or do you want me to attack you?" Renee's body was overflowing with vicious intent. Clearly, she wouldn't give up until she achieved her goal.
"That depends on whether you have the ability or not."
With a powerful aura coming from his body, Dalton drew out the Infinity Sword from his back and swung it at Renee. Ever since breaking through as a level 5 expert, he had yet to find an enemy to practice with. Adding the fact that Renee had gravely injured his relatives right in front of him, Dalton's anger had gone to his head. He no longer cared whether he was a match for her or not. "You're actually a level 5 expert?" A look of surprise flashed across Renee's eyes as she was able to quickly use her spiritual energy to block Dalton's attack head-on. With this, a strong wind swept across the entire hall. Glass shattered everywhere as all kinds of expensive accessories and decorations were shaken away from the walls and ceilings as they fell to the floor. Luckily, none of the Steele family members lying on the ground were hit.
"I had no intention of fighting you today, but I guess you've changed my mind."
Dalton swung his Infinity Sword at her from another angle. "That's cute. But what if you've improved your energy base? I've also improved mine," Renee boasted. A surge of spiritual energy instantly gushed out of her legs as she sent a powerful kick to Dalton's chest. Recently, she'd been training day and night, and finally, after many years, she had broken through as a level 6 expert. Dalton felt as if a high-speed train was going to hit him head-on, and before he could even react, he was already sent flying and crashing through a wall. When Miranda saw him from where she was standing, blood was flowing out from his mouth and nose. "Dalton!" Miranda ran forward with red eyes and tried to protect her husband. "Hubby, how are you? Don't scare me."
"Don't worry about me."
Dalton felt the blood in his body churn. He forced himself to swallow the blood instead of spurting it out at her.
"Go and find Kevin. Tell him not to come back to Chicago."
"Did I say that she can leave?" Renee quickly moved in front of Miranda and was about to strike her with her palm.
"Miranda, run!"
Dalton urged as he pushed his wife out of the way, allowing her to escape through the broken window, while he was hit on the back by Renee's palm. Now, in a daze, he suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Miranda knew that she would only be a burden to him if she stayed. She held back the tears in her eyes and ran as far away as she could until she reached a place where there were more people. "Do you really want me to end your life right now?" Renee hit Dalton hard again. A cracking sound came from his chest as more blood gushed out of his mouth. Renee wanted to chase Miranda, but found that she couldn't move her body. She then looked down and saw the bloody Dalton hugging her legs tightly in desperation. "You really love your wife, don't you?" Renee laughed as she swung her leg, sending Dalton flying out of the door like she had just kicked a soccer ball. When she turned around and saw that Miranda had successfully run away, she called for some union members to take the members of the Steele family back to the Williams family mansion in New York. Miranda, who was panting heavily after running so much, anxiously stood on the street. At the moment, she was worried about Dalton's safety, but she also didn't know where to find Kevin. Tears kept falling from her eyes, attracting the attention of many passers-by. Suddenly, Miranda remembered something. She thought to herself, "Didn't Dalton mention that Kevin is the CEO of the Williams Company? I must find him." The sky gradually darkened. It was late autumn and winter was approaching. However, the Ocean Hotel in Detroit remained brightly lit. The Radiance was so wealthy it had booked the entire hotel as its members enjoyed some fine wine and delicacies and ate to their heart's content. Inside a luxurious private room on the third floor, Kevin, who was disguised as Chancellor Kenneth Wilkinson, was now sitting at the same table with the leaders of the 9 major schools. Since he wore a mask, no one could tell his true identity despite everyone knowing who Kevin was. Not long ago, all of these people seemed out of reach as leaders of powerful organizations. In fact, even Kevin had never expected that he would be able to sit on equal footing with them in just a few months. Although expensive drinks and exquisite dishes were placed on the table, none of the people in the room seemed to have an appetite. This made the atmosphere quite depressing. While waiting for an explanation on the Hayes family attack from the Radiants, the leaders of the 9 major schools realized that they could defeat the new organization if they could find a way to steal their pill recipes. After some time, Kevin was now sitting at the same table as them, disguised as Chancellor Kenneth Wilkinson. However, since he was wearing a mask, no one could tell his true identity. "Everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. There is no need to be shy," Kevin encouraged them with a smile. The 9 leaders looked at each other a few times, undecided on who would be the first to speak. After hesitating for a while, Paul Vaughn finally asked,
"Chancellor, I'm sure that you're a man of your word. Since you said you would give us an explanation tonight, I won't hide anything from you. First of all, why are you wearing a mask? Are you hiding your true face because you have something that's difficult to say?"
"That's a funny joke, Mr. Vaughn. All of you are leaders of your respective schools, therefore I understand how a leader must look like a king in order to lead an organization. Consequently, the reason why I have to wear a mask is because I'm just too handsome," Kevin teased them. "If my members see my true face and become too captivated by it, how will I be able to continue to command the same respect and prestige that I have now?" Jeffrey Bowie and the others were anxious about his reaction. They were expecting that the Chancellor who had built the Radiant and mastered so many pill recipes would be a serious person. They never thought he would say something like that.
"You're just messing with us, aren't you? Since you don't seem to be taking us seriously, I think that tonight's conversation will end here. You'd better disband the Radiants tomorrow, or else you won't have a good life in the future."
Jeffrey had always been quick with words. The atmosphere in the room became tense in an instant, following his ultimatum.
"How dare you disrespect our Chancellor?"
The person standing behind Kevin couldn't help but admonish him.
"Who do you think you are, disrespecting me like that? I was talking to your leader, not some low-ranking subordinate. How dare you interrupt us? Get out of here!"
Spiritual energy gushed out of Jeffrey as he suddenly threw out a punch. However, not only did Spencer not show any signs of fear, but his face also revealed a strong intent to fight back as he took a step forward and lowered his hips. At the same time, he threw a punch with the same amount of force. Everyone gasped as the fists of both men collided. Upon impact, Jeffrey stood still and didn't move, while Spencer took 2 steps back and immediately steadied his body. This result made Paul, Vaughn, and the other leaders tremble. Jeffrey had been a level 5 expert for a long time, but although he hadn't used his full strength right now, he could see that Spencer's strength couldn't be underestimated either. After all, the 9 grade school's leaders were all experts with decades of experience, so they could easily tell how powerful someone was with just a glance.
I didn't expect that the Chancellor would have such an expert by his side.
Paul's face darkened. The stronger the Radiance was, the more difficult it would be for them to achieve their goal of shutting them down. I've trained my men to protect me at all costs. You're lucky he held back with only a warning. Kevin paused for a second, then his tone turned cold. But didn't all of this start because Mr. Bowie refused to see me as his equal? He was the one who showed disrespect towards me and the Radiance first.
If you want to fight, let's fight. Sometimes it's best to just shut up when men can solve problems with their fists instead.
Jeffrey looked at him with disdain.
With your small body, I can surely destroy you with just one punch. Do you want me to prove it to you now?
I've long heard that your body's defense is practically invulnerable, and your martial arts skills have almost reached their peak. How about I learn a few moves from you tonight? Kevin's words were filled with daring intent. Even before coming to the meeting, he already expected that none of the 9 grade school's leaders would take him seriously, so he had to come up with a way to prove himself to them. Coincidentally, Jeffrey's arrogance was an answer to his prayers for him to set an example.
Are you sure you want to fight with me, Chancellor? I'm afraid you won't be able to withstand a beating from me.
Jeffrey taunted Kevin as he looked down at him.
Honestly, I don't think a young man like you is even strong enough to be a leader. How dare you start your own organization?
As soon as he finished speaking, Kevin suddenly made his move. He quickly struck out with the palm of his hand, aiming it square at Jeffrey's chest.
Such lightning speed.
Paul's pupils suddenly widened after seeing Kevin attack in just a split second.
But that punch isn't powerful enough to hurt Jeffrey.
Wayne Ford shook his head slightly. Jeffrey was known for having the strongest defensive capabilities among all the great powers. It was far from something that an ordinary person could break. Everyone saw Kevin's palm hit Jeffrey's chest as the immense amount of spiritual energy on both of their bodies generated dazzling sparks upon impact.
Chancellor, if you only have this much strength, I advise you to give up this nonsense as soon as possible. It would be cruel of me to fight such an inexperienced weakling. You should go back home and train for a few more years before coming out again. You're only making a fool of yourself here today.
Jeffrey completely ignored Kevin's palm and laughed out loudly in disdain. The space here is too small for me to fight freely. How about you and I fight downstairs? Kevin said slowly.
No problem. Since I already gave you a chance to back out, I won't hold back this time. I shall trample you under my feet in front of all the members of your organization. Let's see how you can still maintain your dignity in the future.
Jeffrey sneered as he laughed out loud and walked downstairs. Spencer then went up to Kevin.
Chancellor, this man is too presumptuous. Do you need us to...
Kevin waved his hand and interrupted Spencer's words. Follow me downstairs and call for an ambulance shortly. Mr. Bowie will have to go somewhere to have his injuries treated later. Then he left the room with Spencer and the other Radiance members, leaving the leaders of the remaining 8 schools behind.
What is Jeffrey trying to do? We want the pill formula tonight, not for him to fight,
Paul shouted angrily.
It's not like you don't know about his temper. If you don't let him fight to his heart's content, it's obvious that tonight won't end well for us. Let him have his fun.
Wayne thought for a while and continued.
But this is also a good thing. We should let that young man suffer a little bit to let him clearly understand that there's a very wide gap between us. It should be easier for us to demand the pill formula after this.
The news of Kevin and Jeffrey's battle quickly spread throughout the Ocean Hotel. Upon hearing this, the other Radiance members immediately rushed out of the hotel entrance and gathered around in a large open space. Ever since they joined the Radiants, they had never seen the Chancellor fight before. So tonight would be a good opportunity for them to witness how truly powerful their leader was. "Hey, do you think the Chancellor can win?" one of the Radiant's members wondered.
That's hard to say. Jeffrey Bowie has decades of fighting experience. He's famous for having the strongest defense out of the major schools, coupled with a powerful offense on top of that,
another onlooker remarked. "I know the Chancellor has unmatched skills in herbalism, but will that actually equate to his physical strength?" The third member had his doubts. Thousands of members were currently whispering to each other. Although they were all part of the Radiants, not many of them had high hopes for Kevin. After all, the Chancellor was a mysterious and elusive figure even to his members. Because of that, no one knew how strong he was. In comparison, Jeffrey Bowie's name was quite well known as the dean of both the Northern Institute for Natural Healing and the Southeast School for Natural Medicine. At this moment, even Spencer and the Five Hill siblings couldn't help but break out into a cold sweat.
"Chancellor, I advise you to kneel down before me and admit defeat. If I beat you up too badly tonight in front of your members, I'm afraid you'll lose all your reputation."
Jeffrey crossed his arms in front of his chest and warned Kevin confidently. "Mr. Bowie, you better be careful. I'm afraid you'll have to eat your words in just a few minutes," Kevin replied faintly. Jeffrey's expression changed when he heard that. Seething in anger from Kevin's arrogance, a powerful aura suddenly enveloped his body as his eyes were filled with contempt. And when everyone saw this, it made them feel as if the space around him had changed. It looked like the battle between the two was about to begin. Taking the fight outside the Ocean Hotel, Jeffrey Bowie gave Kevin one last chance to give up and admit defeat in order to avoid embarrassment. However, despite the doubts of his own members who had never seen him fight, Kevin refused to back down and dared Jeffrey to attack. This angered the man, and with his body enveloped by a powerful aura, their battle was about to begin. Jeffrey Bowie casually took a step forward. By now, the expression on his face showed his lethal intent, causing the surrounding Radiance members to tremble in fear. "Tonight, I'll trample you under my feet. By tomorrow, the Radiance will cease to exist." Jeffrey's voice was loud and clear like the sound of thunder. Suddenly, Kevin, who was disguised as the masked Chancellor Kenneth Wilkinson, began to draw all of the spiritual energy in his body. Upon seeing this, the Five Hill siblings and the other Radiance members were anxiously waiting in suspense to find out what would happen next. They knew very well that if the Chancellor lost tonight, the Radiance would no longer be able to exist. And regardless of whether they could still join the 10 great schools or not, the Radiance members didn't want to lose the camaraderie that they had already built with each other in the short time that they'd been together. Paul Vaughn and the other leaders who were observing this from the window of the third-floor private room that they were in were very concerned.
"Looks like Jeffrey's energy base has increased again. He's only a step away from ascending to a level 6 expert," Wayne Ford casually acknowledged.
"If he decides to align himself with the Union, we have no chance of winning against them,"
Paul added. The remaining 6 leaders' eyes revealed a trace of fear upon hearing this. However, Kevin, who was standing right in front of Jeffrey, didn't feel any fear. Instead, he even gestured at Jeffrey to come and attack him. But everyone else who was watching thought that Kevin was courting death at the moment.
"You don't know the difference between life and death, do you?"
Jeffrey growled. The anger in his heart had been completely ignited by Kevin. It had been many years since someone had provoked him like this. With that, he rushed towards Kevin at high speed. They'd started out over 50 feet apart, but in the blink of an eye, that distance had been reduced by half. Just then, the energy in Jeffrey's body had completely erupted, and rather than going for any fancy moves, he simply used his shoulder to ram Kevin with overwhelming momentum. However, the shocking thing was that Kevin didn't choose to retreat. Instead, he decided to use the same method to attack as he rushed towards Jeffrey. A second later, the two opposing forces finally collided. generating a deafening sound. Upon impact, a cloud of dust rippled through the space surrounding the two of them. This was a testament to how much power they used on one another. Given that it was no small amount, someone with lower strength definitely wouldn't have survived this at all. When the dust cleared, someone suddenly pointed as he cried out in alarm, "Look at their feet!" Only then did the others notice that both Kevin and Jeffrey's legs had sunk deep into the ground. The stone and cement couldn't withstand their unimaginable strength. In the end, Jeffrey took 3 steps back, while Kevin's body was as steady as a mountain and didn't move at all. No one had ever thought that the first time the two of them clashed, it would actually be the Radiance's Chancellor who would gain the upper hand.
"I take back what I said earlier. The Chancellor will definitely win,"
one of the Radiance members exclaimed. "Our leader is so awesome! I knew I made the right choice in joining the Radiance," another one shouted. Meanwhile, the faces of the 8 major schools' leaders looked incredibly sad. As Jeffrey's friends for many years, they knew his fighting style very well. Therefore, all of them could tell that he'd already used all of his strength for the powerful attack that he launched against Kevin. How did the Chancellor manage to resist that? Now that Kevin had the upper hand, he no longer planned to show Jeffrey any mercy. Since he didn't need any time to catch his breath, he immediately pulled himself out of the pit and rushed towards Jeffrey once again. This time he managed to strike his defenseless opponent with his shoulder. After being sent flying out of the pit by this blow, Jeffrey grew even more incensed. How could he tolerate this kind of attack? He then took a deep breath and circulated the spiritual energy in his body, preparing to hit Kevin with another shoulder tackle of his own. As the two of them collided once more, a loud sound was heard again. This time the sound was even more thunderous than the previous one, and the surrounding space behind the two of them created an even bigger cloud of dust. When the dust finally settled, everyone could see that Jeffrey had been forced to take several steps back as his chest was heaving up and down. However, Kevin's body still didn't sway at all. "Mr. Bowie, if you only have this much strength, I advise you to give up this nonsense as soon as possible. It would be cruel of me to fight such an inexperienced weakling," Kevin teased. This was the exact same line that Jeffrey had said earlier, but this time he threw those words right back at his opponent. Jeffrey's shock and disbelief upon hearing this made him temporarily forget about his anger. He could clearly feel that the Chancellor's strength was quite a lot to bear. Moreover, it was at a level that completely annihilated all his efforts thus far, and he could tell that the Chancellor had even held back a little. Watching from the 3rd floor window, the leaders of the 8 grade schools couldn't believe what they had just witnessed either.
"How can the Chancellor be so powerful?"
Paul gasped in shock.
Although Kevin isn't as experienced as Jeffrey, he has the strength to more than make up for any gap between them. It looks like Jeffrey is going to eat his words tonight.
Wayne slowly shook his head. Back outside the hotel, Kevin lightly patted Jeffrey on the shoulder and smiled. "Mr. Bowie, you should go back home and train for a few more years before coming out again. You're only making a fool of yourself here today."
"How dare you? Stop using my own words against me. If you suddenly think you can defeat me, then you're too naive."
Jeffrey pounded on his chest with both of his fists like a silverback gorilla. Then he raised his head and let out a loud roar. Immediately, the energy level in his body rose once again, and the aura that he summoned was stronger than ever, causing the surrounding Radiance members to all retreat to one side as their faces turned pale. A faint smile appeared on Kevin's face. He was right to assume that Jeffrey had still been hiding his true strength. Because of that, he'd been provoking his opponent in order to test himself against the full extent of Jeffrey's power.
"If you don't die tonight, I swear I won't be at peace,"
Jeffrey roared angrily. He rushed towards Kevin like a cannonball. As the two of them engaged in a fierce battle, they started attacking each other with fatal blows this time. When Paul saw this, the more he looked, the more shocked he became.
"The perfect fusion of mind and spiritual energy. At his age, I never imagined that the Chancellor's martial arts skills and strength would actually be on par with Jeffrey's.
What an absolutely terrifying person. We definitely can't let someone like him remain alive.
Wayne's eyes were filled with killing intent. Meanwhile, the 5 Hill siblings and Spencer couldn't help but watch closely, as they found the battle in front of them extremely exciting. If they could find a learning opportunity from it, perhaps they would finally be able to break through the bottleneck in their training and become level 5 experts. In contrast, when the other Radiance members saw the same intense action, their eyes began to hurt, as the speed of the 2 men was too fast for less trained eyes to catch. Suddenly, Jeffrey sent a kick towards Kevin's head, which was a sudden change in strategy. With this, his spiritual energy had perfectly integrated into his motion as he swiftly moved his left leg to strike. Fortunately, Kevin had seen this coming, so he managed to move his feet nimbly and slide a few steps backwards. A strong wind brushed past his mask as he just barely avoided getting hit. However, Jeffrey's attack wasn't that simple. Before he could fully withdraw his leg, his entire body quickly spun to deliver a second kick using his right leg. Because Kevin wasn't able to anticipate this, he received a cold and piercing blow to his chest. Although he took 2 steps back due to Jeffrey's unexpected combination move, Kevin's demeanor wasn't affected much. He suddenly took 3 steps forward and attacked Jeffrey's chest with a 2-touch spinning back kick of his own.
"He's really so strong,"
Spencer exclaimed while his eyes remained fixated on the action. He was afraid that he would miss out on any interesting part of the battle.
"I always knew that the Chancellor had such a high energy base, but seeing him in action today with all of his powerful punches and kicks has truly turned me into a huge believer."
Being on the receiving end of this, Jeffrey's body spun twice in the air before landing hard on the ground. To the untrained eye, it seemed like he didn't have any strength left to defend himself against this fierce series of kicks. However, Jeffrey was a powerful man with a great combat experience. Because of that, he'd actually raised both palms to his chest to receive the impact, and then used his spiritual energy to disperse the force of Kevin's kicks in all directions. However, Kevin obviously didn't want to stop his momentum, and as soon as he landed on the ground, he decisively used his right leg again to throw a kick at Jeffrey's head. Once again, Jeffrey seemed to have already expected this. He quickly waved his arm, and after blocking Kevin's kick with his left hand, he used his right fist to send a powerful punch in the opponent's direction. This set off a series of relentless attacks from both sides, and the sound of fists and kicks hitting each other was so loud that it almost made people's eardrums rupture. Moreover, it generated a cloud of dust so enormous that no one could see what was happening for a few minutes. Suddenly, the fighting stopped, and the crowd anxiously held their breath as they waited in suspense. After the dust finally cleared, they saw Kevin, who slowly took a few steps back and let out a deep sigh. However, when they turned their attention towards Jeffrey, the whole place fell silent. The ground within 20 feet of him had been completely shattered. As for Jeffrey himself, although he was almost 6 feet tall, more than half of his body had now been buried under the ground, and his arms were hanging limp. His face was extremely pale, and he was panting heavily. It took a few moments to absorb the situation before everyone slowly regained their senses and came to terms with the end result. Jeffrey Bowie had actually lost. "Are you okay, Mr. Bowie?" Kevin felt that if he didn't put up a show at this time, his previous efforts would have been wasted. Jeffrey wanted to say something, but his body was so weak that he couldn't speak normally. "Do you need my help in pulling you out of there?" Kevin smiled and asked him nonchalantly. He just had to add insult to injury by rubbing his victory in his opponent's face. Upon hearing this, Jeffrey couldn't speak. Instead, he just spit out a mouthful of blood. Now that Jeffrey knew he couldn't underestimate Kevin, who had been disguised as the Radiance's Chancellor, he decided to not hold back anymore and use the full extent of his power to kill his opponent. However, Kevin was prepared for this, and after a series of relentless attacks from both sides, the whole place went silent as they realized that Kevin had stood tall and decisively won over Jeffrey, who was now too weak to fight and had just spit out a mouthful of blood. "Mr. Bowie, why are you vomiting so much blood? I didn't even hit you that hard. Were you actually hurt by that?" Kevin crouched down and laughed softly. "Don't worry, I've already arranged for someone to call an ambulance and take you to the hospital. Rest assured, all medical expenses will be paid for by the Radiants. You don't need to reimburse me for a single cent." When Jeffrey Bowie heard Kevin say that, every word he said struck a chord in his heart. It was painful to admit defeat in such an embarrassing way. However, without an ounce of strength left in his body, he had no choice but to accept the outcome. Finally, he spat out another mouthful of blood before passing out. The people from the Radiants were stunned for a moment. Then they burst into loud cheers.
"I told you from the start that the Chancellor would win, but none of you guys believed me, did you?"
One of the members bragged.
"What are you talking about? I've always been very supportive of our Chancellor."
Another defended himself.
"Chancellor is truly like no other. With such a powerful leader in charge, the Radiants will definitely prosper for years to come,"
a third one exclaimed. Compared to the boisterous atmosphere in the open space outside the hotel, the private room on the third floor was much quieter. Paul Vaughn and the other leaders' faces were extremely pale, and they felt a cold chill down their spine as they shuddered in fear. The 8 of them knew very well that news of tonight's battle would spread out in less than half an hour. The reputation of the Radiants as Chancellor would definitely rise to fame now, since he'd handily defeated one of the great power leaders.
"What an unbelievable performance. I really didn't expect that the Chancellor would be so strong."
After a long while, Paul Vaughn sighed.
"Not only does he have exemplary herbalism skills, but his energy base is also unheard of. It seems like our plans of ending the Radiants tonight won't succeed,"
Wayne Ford acknowledged with disappointment. "Perhaps we should change our approach with the Radiants," the co-head of the Northern Institute for Natural Healing, Rebecca Dunn, suggested. Apart from the 3 who had just spoken, Gerald Foster from the Healers Academy of the West was staring at Kevin with a complicated expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, following the lead of Spencer and the 5 Hill siblings, all the members from the Radiants knelt down on one knee and chanted, "Chancellor, you are indeed powerful. The Radiance is truly in good hands." Kevin slightly raised his hand in acknowledgement and gestured for them to get up. Then he returned to the private room on the 3rd floor with Spencer. The attitude of Paul and the others changed dramatically when they saw him. They were extremely respectful to Kevin, as if they had finally seen him as their equal. For more than an hour, they talked about various matters. Before leaving, Gerald suddenly said,
"Chancellor, I'm not sure if you already know about this. In 2 months, the Herbalist Society will be holding a pill gathering battle. I wonder if you're interested in participating."
When these words came out of his mouth, the expressions of the other leaders became serious. Kevin lightly swirled the wine glass in his hand and asked, "What benefits would I get from joining?" "You might not know this, but the people of the Herbalist Society have always won the pill-gathering battle. Since you also know how to concoct pills, why don't you participate in the competition? After all, it only happens once every 10 years. And if you can defeat everyone, then the title of the greatest herbalist in the world will undoubtedly belong to you," Rebecca explained concisely. "Thank you for telling me. If I have the time, I'll definitely consider it." Kevin said these words in an extremely relaxed manner. When the other leaders had left, he thought about it some more. Although he just handily defeated Jeffrey Bowie to establish his own prestigious chancellor, the Radiants had just been established, so its name still wasn't as well known as the other organizations. Therefore, he felt that the pill-gathering battle would be the perfect platform to make an emphatic statement. By showing the world what the Radiance was capable of, this would definitely put their name on the map as the most powerful organization of them all. 2 days later, Kevin and Thornton flew back to St. Louis. Upon arriving, Thornton quickly returned home to the Huxley family, while Kevin made his way back to the Swinton family mansion, leisurely enjoying the scenery along the way.
When Richard Swinton had gone home the other day, he was surprised to see that Kevin had already left. A little unhappy with his sudden departure, he tried calling Kevin several times to ask him to stay for a few more days, but was unable to reach him. Couldn't he have just called to let him know before he left? He had no idea where his adopted son had gone. In the garden, Richard was sitting on a chair and reading a book while Gail and Brenda were discussing something quietly off to the side, and Catherine was resting on a rocking chair with her eyes closed. Just then, the door opened and a familiar figure slowly walked towards them. Brenda suddenly stood up and asked shyly, "Kevin, is that you?" Gail arrogantly turned her head to the side when she heard this and didn't even look at him. Kevin naturally didn't pay any attention to her. After casually smiling and nodding to greet Brenda, he walked straight towards Richard and Catherine. He respectfully lowered his head and greeted them. "Hi, Dad and Mom. How is everyone?" Catherine slowly opened her eyes and waved at Kevin while she smiled. Then she asked him to grab a chair and sit beside her. Ever since she took the face preservation pill, her attitudes towards Kevin had changed. The more she looked at him, the more she felt that this young man was not only handsome, but also had extraordinary abilities. Despite misjudging him when they first met, his every move and gesture had shown that he was a respectable person after all. Richard put down the book in his hand and asked him with some dissatisfaction,
"Where have you been for the past few days? I tried calling Alan, but your father didn't know where you were. You didn't return to Chicago, did you?"
"Hubby, why are you talking to Kevin like that? He's a grown young man and he can go wherever he wants without telling us. I'm sure he had his reasons." Catherine gently tried to smooth things over.
"All right, since you've said so, I won't make a big deal out of it. However, Kevin, when you leave the house in the future, it wouldn't hurt to give us a call or send a text. Even if I'm not your real father, I was still worried that something was wrong."
Richard sighed. "Yes, Dad." Kevin agreed without saying anything more about it. Then he glanced at Gail, who was still looking down at the floor. Kevin figured that she hadn't informed the others about his plans with Thornton.
"Anyway, I've been trying to reach you for the past few days because I wanted you to attend Grandpa Thompson's birthday with us tomorrow," Richard explained.
"Grandpa Thompson? By any chance are you talking about Herman Thompson?" Kevin asked with a strange expression. He didn't expect to see the members of the Thompson family again for a while.
"Yes, I'm glad you're familiar with him. Anyway, in case you didn't know, Grandpa Thompson had been in critical condition for a while. Thankfully, the Thompson family found a top herbalist grandmaster who cured his illness and saved his life. And now that he's fully recovered, the Thompson family will be having a party to celebrate his birthday,"
Richard informed him. "Did you hear that? The one who saved Grandpa Thompson is a true master of herbalism. Your skills are at most superficial in comparison." Gail proudly raised her head as she sneered at Kevin. "Don't think you can get carried away just because you beat Mr. Huxley one-on-one in an herbalism competition. You're nothing compared to the top herbalists. Dad just wants to bring you there to broaden your horizons so when the time comes, you should listen to him and follow us. Don't do anything that would embarrass the Swinton family."
"Gail, why are you talking down to your brother like that? Hurry up and apologize to Kevin."
Richard scolded her with a stern expression. "I'll never apologize to a country bumpkin." Gail got up and quickly left the garden. Richard saw this and sighed as he shook his head. His younger daughter had been spoiled by his wife, and now she didn't listen to him at all. "Kevin, please don't mind Gail. I know your sister can be a bit rude, but she's actually very kind at heart. I hope the two of you can get along one day. After all, Brenda and the two of you are the future of the Swinton family." Catherine gently reminded him. "I know, Mom." A faint smile appeared on Kevin's face.
"Catherine, since you have nothing to do this afternoon, why don't you teach Brenda and Kevin some meditation techniques?"
Richard suddenly thought of this. "Are you a meditation expert, Mom?" Kevin asked in surprise. He knew that meditation could help nurture one's energy base, but he had yet to fully understand it.
"Kevin, this may surprise you, but your mother actually comes from a long line of outstanding meditation experts, including herself. If there was ever an official rank for it, she would definitely be in the top 3.
Richard flattered her with some pride. There are over 1,000 ancient meditation techniques that have been passed down from generation to generation. In fact, many of these were said to have already been lost, and only a handful of top meditation experts still use them. Catherine explained. People nowadays only pursue fame and fortune. Even the leaders of the great schools are only focused on becoming the strongest and most powerful, which is why everyone is so obsessed with medicinal pills and martial arts training. However, if they don't know how to work on their minds and bodies from within, they may never unlock the true potential of how powerful they can become. Catherine sighed and said, With a small number of meditation experts left, I'm afraid that this ancient practice will soon be lost forever. Thus, the two of you have to remember all the meditation techniques that you'll learn from me. Use it in your training to nurture your energy base. And when the time comes, you must pass down your knowledge to someone else. Don't let this dying art disappear. Yes, Mom. The two replied respectfully at the same time. Because of what Catherine had just told him, Kevin's respect for her became even greater. And at the same time, he suddenly realized something. Although the Radiants had a lot of members, their overall combat strength couldn't be compared with other great powers like the Union or the Southeast School for Natural Medicine, which have had generations worth of knowledge and experience behind them. If what Catherine said was true and the members of the Radiants could learn a few of these meditation techniques, wouldn't this help their strength improve exponentially? You two should go and relax first. I'll teach you both later in the afternoon, Catherine said in a low voice. Kevin and Brenda nodded and slowly left the garden.
Catherine, why are you suddenly being so warm to Kevin today?
Richard asked in surprise. Well, since you've already taken him in as your own son, I naturally have to treat him the same way. Besides, we owe Alan a lot for everything that he's done for us, and Kevin seems like a decent young man who takes after him, Catherine replied softly.
I'm glad to hear that. I really think that Kevin is a good man as well, which is why I want Brenda to marry him. Let him train for a few more years under our watch. Then when he's ready and it's time for us to retire, I'm sure that the legacy of the Swinton family will be in good hands with him at the helm.
Richard was already looking at things from a long-term perspective. In fact, it appeared that he had already had plans in place for Kevin to become his successor as the family's future head. Are you sure that he would be the right man for Brenda? Catherine still had some slight reservations about Kevin. After Kevin and Brenda left the garden, Richard Swinton discussed the idea of marrying the two of them, with hopes that Kevin would one day take over as the future head of their family. However, Catherine still had some reservations about it. Although Catherine was more than happy to treat Kevin as if he was her own son, their eldest daughter's marriage was an entirely different family matter to consider. After all, Kevin had been kicked out of the Williams family. Moreover, he was only brought into the Swinton family because he was Alan Williams' son, and she only accepted him as an adopted son because of Richard's wishes and how he helped her with his herbalism skills. However, was that enough to become an official son-in-law of the Swinton family and inherit the family business? This was also the reason why she tacitly approved of Thornton's pursuit for Brenda. Richard gave his wife a deep look.
I know what you're thinking, but I believe that Kevin has a lot of potential, and he'll prove himself worthy if we give him a chance. So Brenda wouldn't be at a disadvantage if she married him. As for Thornton, while I have to admit that he's also a talent that could be molded, he still has the Huxley family to inherit. So I'm not sure if our family business will be prioritized if he marries Brenda. Besides, I think it's best not to involve ourselves with someone like his father Virgil. I don't trust that man one bit.
I think it's better if we just let Brenda make her own choice. As much as we feel like we know what's best for our daughter, marriage isn't something that parents should be interfering with. From there, we can decide on our family's future. Catherine sighed a little. After that, the two didn't talk much. After everyone had lunch, Catherine brought Kevin and Brenda to the study room for their meditation lesson.
Because it was Kevin's first time learning from an actual meditation expert, he listened carefully to Catherine. While he'd read some books about meditation in the past, his understanding of the topic back then was quite lacking, so he was unable to apply any of it. Now, combining that knowledge with Catherine's teachings, it suddenly gave him a completely new appreciation for this ancient art. The next afternoon, Kevin learned more meditation techniques from Catherine again. When he returned to his room, his phone suddenly rang and Miss Wilson's name was displayed on the screen. "Hello, Miss Wilson. Did something happen to the company again?" Kevin asked in confusion. What he didn't expect was that the person who would answer him wasn't Miss Wilson, but Dalton's wife, Miranda. "Kevin, you finally answered the phone!" Miranda exclaimed as she immediately began to sob. Ever since she escaped from the Steele family mansion the other night, she'd gone straight to the Williams Company to look for Kevin. Luckily, Miranda was quite famous in Chicago, so Miss Wilson naturally didn't dare to neglect her once she recognized who was frantically banging at their office entrance. However, the problem was that Kevin's whereabouts were unknown to anyone at all. For the last 2 days, Mitchell Cook, Adriana Wright, and the others had exhausted all of their resources looking for him. Even Dominic Archer and Philip Quinn had been asked if they had any leads, but they couldn't provide any accurate information. Moreover, his phone had been switched off the whole time, so no one could reach him. "Miranda, don't panic. Tell me exactly what happened." Kevin knew something was wrong from the tone of her voice. "Dalton. Something happened to Dalton. 2 days ago, a woman suddenly came to our house and injured many of our family members. Dalton couldn't match her strength, but he risked his life to stop her just long enough to give me a chance to escape and find you." Miranda recounted the matter hesitantly. Kevin's eyes grew wide as he asked, "How did she find you guys? Did she say who she was?" I don't know, Kevin. Please save Dalton. He was seriously injured and even his family members were abducted along with him." Miranda cried for help. "Miranda, don't worry. I'll find Dalton and the rest of your family." Kevin tried to calm her down as he anxiously scratched his head. "I'm not in Chicago right now, but you can stay with the Williams Company for as long as you need. You should be safe there. Now leave this matter to me and give the phone back to Miss Wilson." "Go ahead, Mr. President," Miss Wilson said respectfully upon getting her phone back. "You have to take good care of my brother's wife. Don't let her do anything foolish, all right?" Kevin ordered firmly. Despite being a strong woman, Miranda was extremely vulnerable at the moment. And since Dalton's kidnappers were still out there, Kevin knew that if she let her worries get the best of her, she might recklessly look for Dalton on her own, putting herself back in harm's way. "Don't worry, Mr. President," Miss Wilson answered very directly. "Okay, I have to go now. Tell her that I'll definitely save Dalton and not to worry." After Kevin ended the call, his expression became extremely livid. He couldn't tolerate the idea of the people around him being in danger, and he knew that someone had deliberately gone after Dalton because she wanted to lure him out of hiding. Unsettled by this thought, Kevin clenched his fists tightly and immediately dialed Spencer's number. "What can I do for you, Chancellor?" Spencer called out respectfully. "I'll give you 10 minutes to investigate what happened to the Steele family in Chicago 2 days ago. Don't hang up the phone yet. I'll stay on the line and wait for your reply." Kevin didn't say anything unnecessary. While he waited, he only heard the sounds of Spencer shouting all kinds of orders coming from the other end of the room. After a few minutes, he could tell there was suddenly a series of hurried footsteps approaching. Spencer quickly reported the information he'd gathered. "Chancellor, we now know what happened. 2 nights ago, the head of the Union barged into the Steele family mansion and caused some trouble. Except for Miranda, all the other members of the Steele family were captured. There were 25 of them in total." "Where did they take them?" Kevin did his best to suppress his anger. "The Williams family mansion in New York," Spencer added. "The Union brought 30 members there to both protect the Williams family and conduct some field training. It It seems that they've been living in their guest house for some time now." Upon hearing this, Kevin's eyes flashed with anger as he seethed in contempt. He finally understood why the Union was causing trouble for him again and again. At first, Kevin thought that it was simply because of their association with Grandpa Williams, but now it seemed like the people from the Williams family had formed a secret partnership with them, and they were the ones who'd been adding fuel to the fire behind his back as of late. When he thought about it, he wished he could run back to the Williams family mansion and immediately confront Thomas about what he'd been doing. "Chancellor, are you still there?" Spencer asked in a low voice. Rather than be blinded by rage, Kevin composed himself enough to give clear instructions. "Yes, Spencer, you and Derek will stay in the Radiance's headquarters. Tell the 5 Hill siblings to lead 3,000 of our men to the Williams family mansion in New York. No matter what the cost may be, they must save the members of the Steele family, especially Dalton. Nothing must happen to him." Spencer and Derek were also members of the Myriads. If someone found out about this, the Radiants would definitely be framed for colluding with evil organizations. And worse, they might even be attacked by the others. So Kevin had to play his cards right and limit their exposure for now. "Chancellor, please forgive me for asking, but what is the relationship between the Steele family and the Radiants? Aren't they just another prominent family from Chicago? There's no need for us to offend the Union on their account. Furthermore, the Williams family holds a considerable amount of influence in New York." Spencer bit the bullet and asked worriedly. After all, he wasn't aware of Kevin's identity outside of their interactions with the Myriads and the Radiants. "Are you questioning my orders?" Kevin asked roughly. "I'm not afraid to tell you that Dalton is my brother, so don't you dare imply that he's not worth saving. Besides, so what if we offend the 10 great schools and they all gather against us? If we have to, we'll fight all of them to the death." "Understood, Chancellor." Spencer suddenly stood up on the other end of the phone and answered firmly, wishing that he hadn't asked such a stupid question. After ending the call, Kevin fell silent as he pondered his plans. "Brother, I'm sorry. I probably won't be able to personally come and save you this time. But you only have to hold on for just a little bit longer. Rest assured, I'll definitely get revenge for the Steele family and destroy the Union." Kevin bowed in his heart. During lunch, he'd already decided that he would bring both the Huxley and the Thompson families to his side on Herman Thompson's birthday. Only by accumulating enough capital and fighting against the forces of evil could he ensure the survival of everyone surrounding him. Ever since choosing this righteous path of upholding justice for the greater good, Kevin had already gone a long way on his journey. It was therefore impossible for him to give up halfway because he was no longer just the useless son-in-law that he'd been in the past. Besides Lily and Dalton, there were also the Williams Company, his close associates such as Mitchell Cook and Tyler Dawn, as well as the members of the Radiants, among others. In total, Kevin had thousands of people that he wanted to protect. In order to fulfill his mission, he couldn't just be another chess piece in the game. Instead, he had to become the player who always outsmarted his opponents by being 10 steps ahead. This way, he could control the entire game with his every move. Meanwhile, in the garden of the Williams family mansion, dozens of members of the Steele family were currently tied up by iron chains. Some of them were even locked in cages. Although the Williams family hated Dalton for offending them twice, none of them appeared in front of him and the other Steele family members. Instead, Thomas Williams instructed the Union to watch over them. By now, the ground was already soaked with pools of blood, but the members of the Union didn't have any sympathy for them. As they took turns torturing their hostages, each Union member seemed to be more ruthless than the last. And all the Steele family members could do was to cry out loud and wince in pain. While Thomas was comfortably sitting on a stool and leisurely drinking his espresso, he remarked,
2 days have passed. I don't even know if that thief Kevin already knows about this matter. Kelly, go and interrogate Dalton.
Mr. Williams, Kelly Emmett stuttered and couldn't say anything. What's the matter? As a senior member of the union, you should be a role model for your junior members. Director Renee Silver furrowed her brows and added, how can you bear the heavy responsibility of becoming head of the union in the future if you're so soft-hearted? If you ever want to be considered for that position, do as Thomas says and interrogate Dalton Steele. Yes, Director. Kelly took her whip, turned around, and walked over to Dalton. Dalton's body was already covered with blood. In the past 2 days, he'd endured countless whippings. Despite this, he only gritted his teeth and kept his mouth shut all throughout. Dalton, you and I are old acquaintances, aren't we? For old time's sake, quickly tell us where Kevin is, and I promise not to make you suffer as much. Kelly stared at him menacingly.
Kelly, why the hell are you doing this? Do you think that I don't know how much Kevin has helped you and how many times he saved your life? Dalton struggled and roared. His eyes were about to turn blood red. It's such a pity that Kevin knows an ingrate like you. How can you not be ashamed of yourself?
When Kelly remained silent, Dalton continued.
To think that the union, who claims to be such a righteous organization, would do such a despicable thing as capturing hostages and torturing them to talk. When I first met you, I actually thought you were one of the good ones. I guess I couldn't have been more wrong about that.
When he had finished speaking, Dalton spitefully spat in Kelly's face. This angered Kelly, who then raised the long whip in her hand and struck Dalton's back as hard as she could. When she did that, a huge gash that had already formed a scar once again burst open, and fresh blood instantly gushed out of Dalton's back. Moreover, Kelly's whip had been soaked in a chili concoction. This added a burning, hot, and spicy kick to the wound, causing Dalton to grit his teeth as he was forced to bear the unimaginable pain. Are you going to tell us where Kevin is or not? Kelly sneered as she whipped Dalton a few more times. When Kelly asked Dalton where Kevin was, he spat on her face after calling her an ingrate. Angered by this, she struck him a few times with her chili-soaked whip, causing him to grit his teeth in unimaginable pain as he bled profusely. She then repeated her question in hopes of urging him to talk. In less than 10 seconds, Dalton's old wounds had been reopened, and many new ones had surfaced as well, causing his body to become even weaker than before.
Kelly, you better make sure that you whip me to death today. That way you can let the other organizations see how despicable the union truly is.
Dalton gritted his teeth and laughed. Why are you doing this to yourself? Don't you want to live? Kelly's expression was very confusing.
I believe that I won't die in vain. When Kevin finds out, he'll surely avenge me and destroy the union once and for all,
Dalton boldly answered. You may not care about your own life, but can you say the same for the rest of the Steele family? Isn't your grandfather still lying in the hospital? Kelly sneered and added, how many lashes do you think that old man can withstand?
If you dare to lay a finger on him, I'll make you pay for it. Even in death, my soul won't rest until I take yours with me.
Dalton struggled intensely. What if we bring him and your wife here instead? They can watch you die with their own eyes and carry that memory with them forever. Kelly continued to verbally torment him.
What a despicable excuse for a human being you are. If you're so brave, then why don't you come at me and give me everything you've got? I seriously doubt that you can make a man like me beg for mercy.
Dalton daringly challenged her. Obviously, he no longer feared death at this point. Is that so? Then today, let's put that to the test and see how manly you truly are. Kelly suddenly waved the whip in her hand and aimed between Dalton's legs. When they saw this, the people from the union smiled callously. However, just as the whip was about to strike Dalton, An axe suddenly flew into the mansion from outside, accurately cutting through the whip in mid-air and splitting it into two. This stunned everyone in the garden. "Who dares to come here and disturb the Union?" Renee Silver suddenly stood up in surprise. At that moment, countless figures appeared at the entrance and barged into the compound in unison. They were all dressed in black and sported armbands with a radiant sun emblem. The 5 Hill siblings then stepped forward and their eyes swept across the garden before finally settling on Renee. "The Radiance?" Renee's brows suddenly knitted together. "When did the Union ever offend you?"
It's hard to say, but we're here today to take the Steele family away from this place,"
Dylan Hill said roughly. "How dare you? And what makes you think that you can do that?" Renee let out a cold snort. Recently, the fierce reputation of the Radiants had spread like wildfire across the other great powers, especially with the news of the Chancellor easily defeating Jeffrey Bowie in a one-on-one battle. Since then, many people had no doubt that the Radiants possessed the ability to challenge any of the top 10 schools it wanted.
"Although it's not a big deal, we have more than enough members to save them today."
Dylan stepped forward and pulled out a knife from his waist. He then stabbed it into the ground to make a statement. "Regardless of your numbers, that will depend on whether you have the ability to save them or not." Renee also took a step forward as a powerful aura surrounded her. Sarah, Julia, Cameron, and Isaiah Hill all stood beside Dylan, then summoned all of their spiritual energy as they prepared to fight. The 3,000 Radiance members behind them also followed suit and drew their weapons one after another. For a moment, the sound of sharp blades being simultaneously unsheathed could be heard without end. Ever since they had consumed the power pills given to them by Kevin, the overall strength of the Radiants had increased tremendously. Currently, the weakest of them were already respectable level 2 experts. "Is the Radiance really going to make an enemy out of the Union?" Renee warned.
Isaiah pointed his blade at her and said, "If you don't let the Steele family members go, then we'll have to take them by force. We'll also have to flood this place in pools of blood as payback for all the pain and suffering that they had to endure."
"Is that a threat?" Renee berated him in a stern voice. Deep down, though, she began to wonder about their chances. While she knew that she was most likely stronger than the 5 siblings because she was a level 6 expert, what about the members of the Union and the Williams family? If a fight really broke out, blood would surely flow like rivers in this mansion, as the others would all be killed by the members of the Radiants. Being vastly outnumbered, how many of them could she kill by herself? Furthermore, the Chancellor's energy base was unfathomable. Should this escalate further into an all-out battle between the two of them, could her strength hold the candle to his?
"Do you dare to test us? Feel free to try, but let me warn you. We, the Radiants, vow to protect the people of the Steele family at all costs, so I advise you not to make any reckless move against us. Otherwise, we'll have to fight to the death today."
Dylan waved his hand menacingly. Under his command, hundreds of Radiance members jumped out quickly from the outer walls of the Williams family compound. They then used the blades in their hands to cut off the iron chains and cages that had bound the kidnapped Steele family members. Even though the Union members were angry about this, they didn't dare to say or to do anything to stop them. After all, with thousands of people from the Radiants facing them, what could 30 members do to defend themselves? "Are you really not afraid of making the Union your enemy?" This was the only thing that Renee could think of saying now that they were forced to stand down in this impossible situation.
"Before we came here, our Chancellor had ordered us to kill anyone who tried to stop us. With him as our leader, we no longer fear anything."
Dylan saw that most of the people had been saved, and after a few minutes, they slowly brought Dalton and the other Steele family members out of the Williams family mansion. Overcome by his anger, Thomas Williams suddenly slapped the stone table in front of him and smashed it into pieces. "Do you want us to chase after them?" Kelly asked anxiously. After Dalton was rescued, she knew that he would definitely find a way to contact Kevin. And if he found out what she did to his brother, how would she be able to show her face to him in the future? "What can I use to chase after him? There are already more than 10,000 people in the Radiance. Moreover, the Chancellor has a mysterious and unfathomable energy base, with several pill recipes at his disposal to keep increasing its strength." Renee resentfully thought to herself. Besides, there were at least 3,000 of them here today. I'll be fine if they really decided to fight, but what about my fellow members, not to mention the Williams family? Because of Kevin, the Union had become enemies with the Healing Arts School, and was indirectly ostracized by the 9 other major schools. Furthermore, because of the promise she made in front of Thomas, she was going to use the people of the Steele family to lure Kevin out and kill him. But now that she was so close to achieving her goal, the Radiance had unexpectedly foiled her plans. And despite her strength, she could only grit her teeth and face the truth. She'd been beaten. The Radiance may have rescued the Steele family for some unknown reason, but I don't believe that they'll protect the other people that Kevin is close with. A violent intent flashed in Renee's eyes. "Director, what do you want me to do?" Kelly asked. "Kelly, bring 10 of our junior members back to Chicago immediately. Investigate all the people who are close to Kevin. This time I must kill that thief with my own hands." Renee clenched her fists as she said this. The next morning, Kevin woke up to the sight of a mysterious figure standing by his bedside. He was so scared that he jumped up from the bed and kicked the person right in the face.
What the hell was that for?
Thornton covered his nose and cursed in pain. "Thornton, what are you doing here? And how long have you been here?" Kevin asked awkwardly when he realized who it was. "Why didn't you tell me in advance that you were going to come?"
"You were sleeping like a baby when I got here."
Thornton struggled hard to speak as he winced. "Didn't you already return to the Huxley family? Why did you come back here? Are you here to see Brenda?" Kevin asked another series of questions.
"What? Why would Brenda be sleeping in the same room as you? If that was really the case, I would definitely fight you to the death."
Thornton sneered as he rubbed his nose. "Then what did you come here for?" Kevin asked as he stood up, still puzzled.
"My dad wants you to go to the Huxley family mansion," Thornton told him.
But just as he said this, he accidentally stumbled on a pillow on the floor, subconsciously grabbing Kevin's pajamas and pulling them down as he fell. With a loud ripping sound, Thornton had torn his pajamas. Kevin lost his balance and fell on top of him.
"Damn, that hurt."
Thornton rubbed the back of his head. However, as Kevin was about to gather himself back up to put on a new pair of pajamas, there was a knock at the door. The two of them looked over, and before they could even react, it was already too late as Brenda and Gail suddenly opened the door. When they saw this awkward scene, the two sisters immediately used their hands to cover their mouths as they stared at them in disbelief. "Did you two just—" Gail was so shocked that she couldn't even speak clearly. Her brain went wild as she imagined all sorts of different scenarios.
"I know what this looks like, but it's not what you think it is," Thornton tried to explain.
"Mr. Huxley, how could you do this to my sister? And you country bumpkin, this is all too much for me." Gail couldn't bear to watch any longer. She covered her face and turned around to run, leaving Brenda alone with Thornton and Kevin. "Brenda, this is all just a big misunderstanding. There's nothing going on here between the two of us." Thornton hurriedly waved his hands and explained. Only then did he realize that he was actually holding a torn fragment of Kevin's pajamas as he immediately threw it away. Brenda quickly recovered from her shock. She calmly smiled and said, "There's no need to explain. I'm not here to judge whatever's going on between the two of you. It's just that you should be more careful next time and remember to lock the door. After all, it wouldn't be good if you were caught by someone else."
Don't worry, Brenda. We'll definitely be more careful next time.
Thornton had just said this when he suddenly realized that something wasn't right.
Wait, that didn't come out right. That's not what I meant.
It's really okay, guys, Brenda reassured him. We only came by here to tell you that breakfast will be ready soon. Anyways, I'll go downstairs now and leave the two of you alone. Just come down and eat with us once you're finished, Kevin. With that, Brenda closed the door. In her mind, she remembered what Thornton had said just now. Wow, that stung more than I thought it would. Didn't those two hate each other? I can't believe they would. Brenda hurriedly shook her head a few times. However, the more she deliberately tried not to think about it, the more the image stuck in her mind. It made her so embarrassed that her face turned as red as an apple. After catching Kevin and Thornton in a seemingly compromising position and thinking the worst, Gail stormed off in disgust. And amidst Thornton's failed attempts to explain the awkward situation, Brenda tried to play it cool before leaving him and Kevin alone. As soon as Brenda closed the door, Thornton stomped hard on the floor and said unhappily,
"Why didn't you say anything just now? Hurry up and change so we can go down and explain that I only have Brenda in my heart."
Hearing this, Kevin simply shook his head at everyone's wild imaginations. However, he suddenly remembered what Thornton had told him earlier. "Before we do, I have to ask, why does your father want to see me all of a sudden?" Kevin asked him very seriously.
"How would I know? Maybe he knows that you've been bullying me, so he wants to beat you up to vent his anger,"
Thornton replied angrily. Kevin stared at him without saying anything. Thinking about all kinds of possibilities, he was sure that Virgil didn't know that he was in fact the Radiance's chancellor. At the same time, inside the dean's office of the Healing Arts School, Wayne Ford was leisurely drinking his coffee when suddenly the door was pushed open. Harley Shepard hurriedly walked in, and his face was as gloomy as the dark clouds in the stormy sky.
"What happened to you so early in the morning?" Wayne asked curiously. "The Healing Arts School is currently on a vacation break, so what could possibly make you angry right now?"
Harley held it in for a few seconds before explaining why he was so upset.
"Roger Knott is gone."
"What?"
Wayne hurriedly stood up as the coffee mug in his hand fell to the ground and broke into pieces.
"I just went to the basement to take a look, and the iron chains looked like they'd been severed by a sharp blade. I also asked the guards about it, but none of them ever saw anyone go to the basement recently."
Harley concisely told him everything he knew. Wayne was getting more and more angry. Roger Knott was one of the higher-ups of the Myriads, and the people of both the Healing Arts School and the 10 major schools had gone through a lot of effort just to capture him alive. Now, not only did they fail to get the secrets of the consolidation technique from Roger, but he also had disappeared without a trace. Wayne let out a long, desperate sigh.
"The Myriads are really something. How did they actually manage to rescue someone without making any noise?"
"It can't be someone sent by the Myriads."
After denying it, Harley immediately added,
"According to the information I received, the Myriads have been under Brett Stewart's control ever since Travis Adams died, and within half a month all of their remaining forces in Chicago had been pulled out."
Harley continued,
"Besides, the entire Healing Arts School is under our control, and the library is heavily guarded. So even if anyone from the Myriads managed to sneak in, it would be impossible for us not to notice them. Furthermore, there must be a proper reason to enter the basement."
Harley stopped talking when he and Wayne suddenly thought of one person. Only he had the key to open the basement, and only he had the ability to enter without raising any suspicion. Who else could this person be other than Kevin, who had won first place in the martial arts competition?
"Impossible. It can't be him. Kevin is just a student. He can't be colluding with the Myriads," Wayne firmly insisted.
"But aside from Kevin, no one else has a good reason to do so for the time being,"
Harley admitted with a resentful smile. He really didn't want their guess to be correct. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door as Professor Murdoch slowly walked in. She nodded respectfully to the two of them and said, "Dean, Vice President, I've just reviewed the surveillance footage. About a month ago, Kevin brought one person with him inside the library's basement, but then there were 2 people who came out with him. After that, they quickly left the school grounds and he's never come back since." As soon as she finished speaking, the entire office fell into a dead silence. Harley and Wayne's faces were extremely glum as they looked at each other, and a powerful aura was emitted from their bodies. Even with Professor Murdoch's energy base, her face immediately turned pale upon seeing their reaction.
"Are you sure it's really him?"
Although it was just a few simple words, it took Wayne a lot of effort to say them out loud. "I'm afraid so." Professor Murdoch nodded with difficulty. Only 2 people had gone into the basement, but there were 3 of them when they came out. Wasn't this enough to prove that Kevin was the culprit? If he hadn't let Roger Knott go, why would they be so anxious about his current whereabouts? And why hadn't he returned to the Healing Arts School since leaving that day? After pondering for almost half an hour, Wayne finally spoke.
"Professor Murdoch, send out an arrest order immediately to inform everyone in the Healing Arts School that they must capture Kevin and bring him to me. Just make sure that nobody hurts him. After all, I want to speak with him first before making my final decision."
"Yes, Dean." Professor Murdoch quickly walked out of the office, but her heart was filled with anxiety. She had high hopes for Kevin. He was a promising student, and his talent in herbalism was amazing. But how could he do such a stupid thing? He even colluded with the Myriads? After Professor Murdoch left, Harley and Wayne exchanged glances.
"Do you know what I'm thinking right now?"
Harley asked anxiously.
"You and I should be thinking the same thing. I just hope that Kevin's mind hasn't been seriously brainwashed by the Myriads yet, so that we can still pull him back onto the path of righteousness."
Wayne slowly closed his eyes. He clearly remembered what the Night King had told him before. Kevin was their only hope in the ultimate showdown against the forces of evil. This endorsement was enough to prove how truly powerful a talent he was. However, if such a genius decided to embark on the path of darkness and evil, this would surely bring mass destruction and devastating losses to the world. Meanwhile, Kevin, who knew nothing about what was happening at the Healing Arts School, had just gone along with Thornton to the Huxley family mansion. As soon as they got out of the car, they were greeted by all of the Huxley family staff members as they entered, and upon walking into the main hall of the mansion, Kevin almost jumped up in surprise. He was surrounded by extravagance wherever he looked. The floor tiles were made of expensive Italian marble. The tables were filled with ancient Greek artifacts, and the walls were lined with rare paintings from the likes of Da Vinci, Rembrandt, and Renoir, and many others. With these easily being worth hundreds of millions of dollars, it seemed that Virgil Huxley certainly wasn't shy about flaunting his wealth. Kevin finally understood why Thornton didn't like the Hayes family. The Huxley family was simply on a completely different level. Even the Williams family couldn't hold a candle to them. However, Kevin hid his shock very well. He kept reminding himself that he was here to be a guest, and that he shouldn't act like he'd never seen the world. At the moment, Virgil Huxley was sitting in an armchair staring at Kevin as he and Thornton slowly walked towards him. "Greetings, Mr. Huxley. Thank you for inviting me." Kevin, who had finally calmed himself down, lowered his head slightly.
"You're welcome, Mr. Williams. Please have a seat."
Virgil gave him a deep look, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Anyone who came to the Huxley family mansion for the first time would be amazed when they saw the extravagant decorations in the hall. Only Kevin had remained calm and composed. Wasn't he impressed by any of it?
"This young man is really different,"
Virgil thought to himself.
"Can we have some coffee here, please?" Thornton ordered loudly.
Immediately, 2 staff members came and served them coffee. "Is this black ivory coffee?" Kevin exclaimed. He knew that this brand of coffee had come all the way from Thailand. It was prepared by having elephants consume and digest Arabica beans, which gave its drink a signature robust flavor. Produced in small and limited batches, this was known to be the most expensive coffee in the world. "Can the Huxley family be any more extravagant?" Kevin remarked. As he took a sip of the coffee, the corner of his mouth twitched a few times. It was like drinking liquid gold. Fortunately, Kevin lowered his head slightly so neither Virgil nor Thornton could see the change in his expression.
"Do you like coffee, Mr. Williams?" Virgil asked with a smile.
"Mr. Huxley, I grew up in a poor family. Good coffee like this would have been considered a luxury." Kevin put down his cup and replied faintly.
"I'm glad that you know how to appreciate good coffee. Anyway, the reason why I invited you today is mainly because of what happened a few days ago between you and my son. Because of his arrogance, I've indirectly offended you and the Swinton family. With that being said, please allow me to apologize to you on his behalf."
Despite his status, Virgil seemed like he was indeed an honorable man. "Mr. Huxley, there's no need to apologize. That small matter is already water under the bridge." Kevin didn't dare accept the apology. With that, the conversation suddenly came to an end, and for a moment the large hall had suddenly become extremely quiet. Virgil suddenly asked him,
"A few days ago, my son followed you out of St. Louis. He didn't cause you any trouble, did he?"
"I heard that you encouraged him to go with me. Rest assured, Thornton was a decent companion. In fact, he even helped me a lot." Kevin smiled. Thornton glanced at him proudly. He wanted to tell Kevin,
"It's good that you know."
Deep down, Thornton was a little angry and resentful in his heart. How could his father be so kind towards Kevin while being the opposite with him?
"Well, my son had to honor his word to you."
Virgil hesitated for a few seconds before continuing.
"By the way, I didn't expect you to have such a deep relationship with the Radiants."
This was the real reason why he'd asked for Kevin to join him today.